Well, at least golf's doing okay. Looks like golf's doing good. No cell phones in the crowd today. Masters looks like it did 50 years ago, maybe a little bit better picture. So, hey, someone appreciates their tradition and pageantry and doesn't really bend because someone outside the gates wants them to. It's totally unrelated to where college football is now. I certainly don't mean anything by that. We're jam-packed. We're high atop just a picturesque, postcard-esque downtown Nashville, Tennessee on this Sunday night, April 13th, the year of our Lord 2025. Proudly brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. It is a knuckle-cracking show tonight. It's not a fun one, but I've waited a solid 48 hours, and I'm ready to talk about it. Nico is not at Tennessee anymore. We'll lead the show with it. Got plenty to say, as you might imagine. The spring portal, were we a year early on it? I'm going to revisit one of the darkest chapters of my somewhat storied career here a little bit later on in the show, because I said something. Back in the day, I predicted TCU to be good, and they sucked, and then they were good a year later. I predicted the portal to pop off in post-spring last year, and it didn't. We could have been a year early. That's all I'm saying. We got spring games. You remember those? Yeah, spring games happened yesterday. I do have some thoughts, not on the games per se, because they were a mockery of what spring games are, but I do have some post-spring thoughts and intel from a number of places. Plus, the Truth Teller series continues tonight, and we're not telling the truth about a coach. We're not telling the truth about a program, although we will do those in the show too. You know what I'm telling the truth about tonight? Big noon kickoff. Not even a property owned by this network that I work at, but a property that is near and dear to my heart nonetheless, and every one of you disagree with me, and I know. We have fought about it before. We will fight about it at least once more. They're watching us in Pensacola, Florida, Elwood City, Pennsylvania. This town is called Florianopolis, Brazil, I think, and also Columbus, Ohio, a lot easier, relatively speaking. I'm going to be on the road this week again, people. We've got a Pate State Speaker Series visit, first of its kind this week. I'm just going to go to Arizona State Tuesday because I like those guys. So we're going to hang out there. But yeah, we got a lot to do, and we'll have a show Thursday. Okay, so there's all the programming, news, and notes you need. I can't believe what's written on this piece of paper, Colin, but we're going to have to talk about it. So by now, every one of you know Nico Iamaleava's not at Tennessee anymore. Just a complete embarrassment on all fronts of a situation that's been brewing for a long time, not necessarily specific to Tennessee, but like this kind of garbage has been coming for a long time. So the first thing I want you to notice as we dive into this is a lot of the people who have been pushing for the changes that are happening in this sport, they would call them progress, I would call them just changes. A lot of the stuff they told you didn't have to worry about, a lot of the stuff they told you that wouldn't happen, it's funny how it keeps happening. These are the same people who would tell you players would never opt out of playoff games, you know. If we had more playoff games and less meaningless bowl games, then players won't opt out of playoff games. You know, that same crowd fails to mention that this past December, cats like Nico Iamaleava almost held out of playoff games because they were trying to renegotiate contracts in the middle of a playoff run. He wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only one. But just understand, all these people who cannot take a piss without getting the front of their pants wet, that claim to know what's best for this sport and claim to be visionaries, and boy, they can type a lot of words per minute, can't they? They have not the slightest clue what's best for this sport. And so we've taken the stance on this show for the past several months that we'll just ignore them. I don't really care. I don't care if you label me anti-players' rights. I don't care. I am pro-college football. That's what I am. Been very clear about it, and so everything you're going to hear come out of my mouth is going to be with the best interest of college football in mind. Now, that doesn't mean I couldn't have a screwed up theory or thought, but I am doing it, and I'm being very clear about it, with the best interest of this sport in mind. With that in mind, this stuff goes down. I assume most of you know what happened, but if you don't, late last week, you start to see the reports that Nico Iamaleava is still deep in negotiations because he's getting, I think, about $2.4 million this year, but he wants $4 million plus this year. And, of course, that's ludicrous. But, you know, hey, in a free market, get whatever you can get. And so then he has a bunch of his representation go pure clown mode, and they try and shoot it down. They called Nakos, all kind of unmentionable words on a family-friendly show such as this. And mind you, they're excoriating the guy as they know good and well they're negotiating behind the scenes. Why did they do that? Why did they act like clowns? Because that's what they are. That's who's running the show in many of these negotiations. You know, Colin, show that tweet I put out. Actually, I did not want to do an instant reaction video because I would have just, we would have had to pre-record it because I would have said too much I regretted. But here's what I did put out. When this went down, because what happened is when that stuff happened and Tennessee called his bluff, he no-shows practice Friday. Hypel says, yeah, we're done. So once that news breaks and they're parting ways, I put this out. What an embarrassment in Knoxville. There are no winners. College football continues to benefit people outside the sport at the expense of everyone in it. So to be clear, the people who are in this sport are the players, the coaches, and then us, fans. Those are the ones in the sport. You may think to yourself, well, Josh, how is it not benefiting the players? They're getting a ton of money. They sure are. They sure are. Some of them, a very, very limited sample size, but some of them are getting more money on the front end right now than they would have otherwise in exchange for playing for 3 programs in the span of 4 years, as opposed to the old school way of doing things and developing and letting roots take in one program and maximizing your future earnings at the next level. Or if you don't go to the next level, maximizing what the value of your degree is, something that the clown world will tell you doesn't matter but still very much does, so that you can prosper for decades to come instead of months to come. So right now, we have a situation set up where you've got people who are the most ill-equipped imaginable to represent anyone, including themselves, that claim to be representing players. Nico is the latest example. There are people who have called themselves representing him that have no business representing anyone in any kind of negotiation because they're not qualified or capable to do it. But since there really are no rules or guidelines or certification necessary because it's college football, why would we have our ducks in a row? That's allowed to happen. And it's been happening behind the scenes. This is not even, guys, I cannot stress this enough, this is not even remotely close to the only instance. There are far more screwed up instances than this happening right now, probably with your own collective or your own general manager and your own program. You just don't know about it. This stuff was happening last December during the playoffs, with this kid included, but not just this kid. They were trying to get more money out of Tennessee, and other players on playoff teams were trying to get more money out of playoff teams before the playoff games. They were trying to leverage playoff participation because, do you know why? You want to know what the explainer was? The explainer was, well, our client, half these folks don't know the I comes before the E in the word, but hey, our client is being paid X amount of money to participate in 12 games, maybe a 13th if you make the conference championship game, but you guys made the playoff. He should make more money. This is the kind of BS that's happening behind the scenes right now. There is no structure. So Josh Hypel gets to a point where he has no other alternative. Colin just put up that tweet where I said there are no winners. A lot of Tennessee fans pushed back on me yesterday and said, oh, sure there are winners. Our head coach took a stance. Our head coach took a principled stance. He didn't let one player elevate above the program. Well, I never said he did, but make no mistake, cutting your losses is not the same as winning. Cutting a leg off to make sure that infection doesn't spread to the rest of your body doesn't mean you're better than you were before you cut the leg off. It does mean you made a sound, tactical judgment call to survive, and Josh Hypel made a sound, tactical judgment call to cut loose an appendage that at this point was of no further value to his team, not to mention he didn't think it was worth $4 million, nor does anyone else in their right mind. But they're not a winner. Tennessee's not a winner. The guy they had their entire offense built around as recently as 72 hours ago is not there anymore. They're not a winner. No one's a winner. Everyone's a loser. This is happening more and more. There are situations where everybody inside the college football bubble, the coach, the program, the player, the fan base, they lose, and you've got some clown trying to represent someone to squeeze $1 million more out of a collective. That's the only one that may stand to win in the entire proposition. It's not the way anything is set up to sustain. College football can't sustain that way. I don't really care that anyone else took to Twitter or took to their own show or just yelled on the street corner yesterday, well, good for Nico. I mean, Nico should be able to get as much as he wants. Yeah, okay, all right. At what end? This is what bothers me probably more than anything about the entire situation. I don't just mean Tennessee and Nico. I mean where college football is right now. Where college football is right now is pathetic. You've got so many people from all angles arguing over how the resources should be allocated. You've forgotten where the resources come from. You've forgotten where the money comes from. I'm pointing to where the money comes from. It's me. I'm pointing to where the money comes from. It's you watching. You, the season ticket holder. You, purchasing YouTube TV. You, the fan. This sounds really, really childlike, and it sounds sort of like rainbows and unicorns, and oh, that's cute, that's fun to tell yourself. No, it's reality. It's reality. They build those stadiums 100,000 plus because there is a mass interest in this sport. And that creates very, very valuable properties. They're called inventory, football games, because a lot of people like to watch it. And then your Foxes and CBSs and ESPNs come along and say, well, we'll pay a lot of money to be able to broadcast this because we know how many people are at home watching, and we can sell advertising against this, and all the big brands in the country will want to advertise up against those games because they know the audience is going to be there. And then that makes a ton of money. And then the players look around and say, well, we want some of that. And then a lot of other people say, well, yeah, they should get a cut of it. And then they argue, no, they shouldn't get a cut of it. And that goes on for 20 years. And then finally, you're going to get a little bit in the way of NIL, and then the transfer portal, and then courts say, well, you can't enforce this rule, and you can't enforce that rule. There is no limit to how screwed up things can get when the wrong people are in charge. That applies across the board, kids, but college football's finding that out. There is no limit to how bad things can get and how screwed up things can get. There are so many cautionary tales throughout history of something that once was good and the wrong people got their hands on the wheel. And the bad part about this is when things are going good, that's when everyone lets their guard down. When things are going good, that's when you take your eye off the wheel and you never know that someone from the back seat or someone who was in the trunk where they belong snuck up there and got their hands on the wheel, and all of a sudden we're going down a road we're not supposed to go down. But hey, people are still watching, people are still watching the games, so that must mean everything's good. Look, the ratings are good. That's why I keep using the poison metaphor. St. Louis and New Orleans, they have something in common. They're both located along the Mississippi River, but they're hundreds of miles apart. So if a resident in St. Louis just takes to pouring thousands of gallons of toxic chemical into the Mississippi, it wouldn't be very smart to call down to his buddy in New Orleans 5 minutes later and say, anything yet? No. Guy in New Orleans says, water looks good to me. Well, hasn't had time to get downstream yet. Check back with him in 5 weeks and ask him what the water supply is like down there. But see, at that point, the guy in New Orleans can't take preventative measures, because the thing about a preventative measure, by its very definition, is you have to do something about it before the problem exists. And that takes foresight, which good leaders have, but we don't have those in college football right now. And so they can't see around the corner. They don't anticipate, because these aren't very talented people. I don't care if they're located at NCAA headquarters. I don't care if in some cases they're university presidents. A lot of these people elevated a bureaucratic ladder where they didn't so much climb as they slithered up it. And the only reason they hung out on that ladder so long is because they didn't have enough talent to make it in the private sector. They never created anything themselves. And so they latched onto what others created and found a way to screw it up because they really don't have a lot of talent and they don't have a lot of foresight. You just count on the fact that because that sweater vest looks so nice and neat, and that Lexus you pulled up in looks so expensive, you must have everything figured out. They don't. They don't. What they have figured out is a way to just survive and just slither. And so they get in positions where in lieu of real leadership, they're the ones driving the bus. It's been a problem for decades in college football. It's just that if you're a fan of Iowa, you didn't really want to worry about that on Saturday when Northwestern's coming to town. You just want to have a good time. It's not your job to worry about it, by the way. But all the while, there's been trouble brewing. The poison has been dumped in the river. It's been headed downstream for quite a while. It's just, you're kind of finally tasting it. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is it can be rectified. It's not a permanent issue. It can be rectified. But shouting someone do something is not an answer. That's not a game plan. So to go back to what I was talking about for a second, Trust me, we got plenty of time tonight. There are many angles I want to take on this. Hypel did what he should have done. Okay, Hypel did what I would have done, but as I've told Josh Hypel to his face, and as I've told many other head coaches, one of the many reasons I couldn't have your job is I would make that call way before you made the call. I'd make the call the first time somebody's agent or representative hit me up in the middle of the season. I had a head coach recently give me a story about a guy that wasn't necessarily the best practice player. It's not Tennessee, it's not Nico, but still kind of case in point here. This head coach told me a story about a guy that wasn't one of their better practice players, not a great energy guy, not a terrific locker room guy, not a cancer or anything like that. Just, I mean, not a guy that they would promote as one of the faces of the program. Let's just put it that way. But they have, a game or a spring game one time where he gets in and he's a gamer, So spring game format being what it is, a lot of people get in that normally wouldn't get in a real game. So he gets in and he shines and he pops a couple of times, big plays. Well, reckon where he is the next day. He's in the collective's office. He wants $150,000 more dollars or he's going in the portal. It's at that point where I probably commit a felony. So I couldn't do this. I know I'm not cut out for it. And you've really got to have the patience of Job and then some, because Job didn't even have to deal with the portal. You got to have the patience of Job and then some to deal with this. So I look at Josh Hypel, and yeah, I fist pumped yesterday. I fist pumped when he did what he did. The words "good for Josh Hypel" came out of my mouth too. We weren't disagreeing on that. If you're a Tennessee fan watching, we weren't disagreeing on that, you and I. What we were disagreeing on, some of us, was you're not in a better place now for this season than you were before you lost your starting quarterback. Now, what I don't know is how angry those people are. Well, I do know how angry they are. Are they angry enough to where they just go and pull a blockbuster shocker acquisition in the portal? They may be. I have no clue what's about to happen. They may be. But I'll go back to what I just said. You got so many people just blinded, and they're so close to the forest. They can't really see the individual trees. They don't. So many people are running their mouths in college football right now that they don't understand what they're arguing over is semantics, and you're arguing on the deck of a sinking ship. It doesn't matter who wins the argument. You are a bunch of people, in many cases, who are not responsible for building the greatness of college football. You're arguing over how to divvy up resources and who should get this and who should get that. It's like a water dispute back home where I'm from. You'd have new people building on property they own, and you're arguing over, well, who should get access to this tributary and who should get access to this stream, and are you allowed to build this dam here and there? And it's this fixed pie mentality that they operate on that, well, the water's the water. It'll always be the same amount. Well, what if the lake dries up? Doesn't really matter if you got permission to build your dam at that point, does it? It doesn't really matter if you got your contractor out there and your surveyor out there and you leveled that ground just right. There's no more water. So the same question applies here. Well, what if you get your argument to go your way? What if you get federal intervention on the commissioner's side? Or what if you get full employment on the agents and the player side? But nobody's there anymore. What if the money dries up? Well, that can't happen, Josh. People would never turn away from football. People would never lose interest in football. Well, not totally. But did you check out spring attendance yesterday? See those pictures from all over the country? Anybody? No, because most of you didn't attend one. It's not the end of the world. Talked about this the other day. Bad faith actors will come in and say, spring attendance doesn't matter. You'll be there in the fall. Yeah, I'll be there in the fall. I will be there in the fall. But that's just another thin layer of connective tissue that used to exist between the fan, or as you would call them, the consumer. You don't really give a crap about a fan, but you would call them a consumer, and your product. National Signing Day used to be a holiday. Nobody really cares about it anymore. Spring games used to be cause for a pilgrimage for alumni to bring their kids back to campus, or lower income families can't afford tickets, but they can afford to go to Bryant-Denny Stadium for free. It used to be the case. Did you check out spring attendance yesterday? Well, I'm sure that's not a warning sign at all. Yeah, I'm sure they'll always just be there, because if there's one thing that history has taught us, it's that you can build something on a foundation, but then change everything about the foundation and what initially drew that crowd there, they'll just always stay. Everybody's stupid. So you can play them for fools and they'll just always show up. Some people actually believe that. I happen to not be one of them. So you've got warning signs. You got lights blinking in your face right now. And that's kind of a message to everyone. If you're a conference commissioner, or you're a university president, or you work at the NCAA, or you're a player, or you represent one, or you're a general manager, or you're a head coach, but just 5 seconds, back away from the table for a second and ask, what's the main thing? The main thing is not whether you get your money. Because if that was the main thing, then that means you can always assume the money will be there. You can't always assume that. You don't always know the money will be there. Just like you don't always know the water will be there. You got to make sure the water is going to be there. And the other part is moving forward. This is what I kept thinking about yesterday. What happens to Nico? I saw reports. I didn't even bother to research it, so this may or may not be true. I don't care. But I saw reports that he hired a real agent. If so, good. But I had a buddy text me and say, who's going to have the stones to sign him? Because won't he be a bad guy? Won't he be perceived as a bad guy no matter where he goes? By many people, yeah, he will be. I'll tell you one thing that could change that is if the person who's really at fault, or the people who are really at fault for this, stand up and take the arrows, so the kid in the room still gets to have an enjoyable college career. Because if you think for a second, Nico Iamaleava, an adult though he is, if you think he was the one pulling all the strings on this, you're insane. There have been a ton of bad decisions made. One good decision that could start to rectify this is the folks who dug the hole for him, instead of tossing his body in there, how about you step up and say, I screwed up and it's on me. And if you want to hate somebody, hate on me, but give the details. It wasn't him negotiating this. It wasn't him that knocked on the door and said, we want $4 million instead of 2.4, or we're out. Or if it was, then it was. I highly doubt that's the way it went down. So that's how you may spare Nico Iamaleava from what he would suffer wherever it is he ends up. I don't know how he's going to be viewed. And I do understand when people get upset when you say, well, it's not fully on Nico, which I don't think it's fully on Nico, but he is an adult. It sucks that a lot of times, whether you're a football player or not, you got to make the most important and impactful decisions in your life when you're the least equipped, because you're ignorant when you're 19 or 20 years old. When you're 60, you got all the answers. And if you could control a 20-year-old version of yourself with a joystick, yeah, you'd make sound calls in every facet of life. That's not the way it works, though. And so it may be unfair that you got a kid, not by birth certificate, but by societal standing. You've got a kid, 19, 20, 21 years old, that's having to navigate this. But you know what? Tough. You're in a unique situation. You gotta nut up a little bit yourself, and you got to tell people when they don't have your best interest in mind anymore, or when they don't know what your best interest is, you better have the wherewithal to step away. I know it's hard. It's hard to do it when you're twice your age. It's especially going to be hard to do it when you're your age, but you're one of one. There are not many people out there with the God-given ability you have. So you're not going to be able to lean on your buddies for advice. It's going to be very lonely. Truth be told, you probably get more sound feedback from inside the program that you're negotiating with, because at least those people have extensive backgrounds in this field. Or go hire yourself a real agent. The real agents, by the way, few and far between though they may be, they are out there. And so for his sake, I hope that is true. But a lot of people, man, a lot of people yelling right now. Well, I think everyone realizes the situation's screwed up now. I think I can count on one hand the amount of people who are still satisfied with where college athletics are. And I've told you for a while, you and I disagree on individual things, playoff expansion being one of them. And I've told you for a while, I'm not making this about playoff expansion, but anytime we've talked about this, whether you wanted it to expand or I didn't want it to expand, I always told you it's not about expanding the playoff in a vacuum. It's about who wants the playoff expanded and why they actually want it expanded. You may want it expanded because you really think it's going to level the playing field, or you just want to see more playoff games. You think it sounds fun. I disagree with you, but I don't care. If that's your motivation, great. We just define good in a different way. But the cats over here pulling the strings do not care about the things you care about, nor do they care about the things I care about. They found a way to build an ATM machine, but they couldn't call it an ATM machine because that would insult your intelligence. And they did need your support. They needed broad fan support. So they called it an expanded playoff. It was an ATM machine. It was a reason for them to print money. People like me who sat here and said, I don't like what that's going to do to the regular season, you just got cast aside. And there weren't enough of us who felt that way, and it was really irrelevant, even if enough of us did feel that way. It was going that direction. Well, then we got to things like the transfer portal and things like NIL, which on the street is known as pay for play, but we still use that 3 letters for some reason. There are a lot of people who threw up red flags on that, but you got labeled as anti-player if you did that. Well, no, I'm not anti-player at all. Never. Who in the world's anti-player, by the way? Your Uncle Jerry, who's 113 years old down in Bessemer, notwithstanding. Like, who's anti-player? I'll tell you what I am, though, is pro-college football. So there are some thoughts out there that if you just make these players employees and you collectively bargain with them, all the problems will go away. No, they won't. You'll just create a new set of problems. I truthfully don't think there's an answer where all the problems go away. But I am in the minority on this. At least it feels like in my profession, but I don't really care if anyone in my profession agrees with me. I believe that they have to get federal intervention in order to fix this in the best interest of college athletics. That's what I think. There may be a player or two who in the aggregate makes less money because of that, although the majority would make more money because of that. But don't ignore what Dellinger put out tonight. Tonight being Sunday. As I'm talking to you, it is Sunday late evening. It's 7:26 Sunday evening. Over at yahoosports.com, Ross Dellinger put out a pretty interesting piece today, but it didn't have anything directly to do with the Nico, Tennessee situation, which everyone's caught up in. It's a hornet's nest that had a baseball bat taken to it. But there was some pretty interesting information in the Dellinger piece. Now, I say all this like I have Colin ready to tee it up and go. I don't. But I will tell you, it's over there right now. I would argue they need a college football tab on the front page of the website, if anyone at Yahoo is listening. But you can find it. And he said that there is a bipartisan group from Congress that feels they are as close as they've been to achieving limited antitrust exemption to codify the House settlement, if we get it, into law. And it would provide the mechanisms needed to enforce rules. When we get to the rev share later this year, you got the revenue share, but then above and beyond that, the entire thing depends on how enforceable the NIL model is. Because the way the thing's worded is NIL can only be fair market. In other words, you can't do what you do now, which is pay a kid $2.5 million to make a few autograph signings and call it NIL, because in this new world, an enforcement body, a third-party enforcement body would say, you got to prove that the market value for that autograph signing is $2.5 million. Now, right now, that's illegal. But if you get that federal overreach, some would call it overreach, whatever it is, I think it's in the best interest of college athletics at this point. If you get that protection, then you have teeth. You can actually enforce your rules. And at that point, NIL being pay for play becomes far less an issue. And then you just have payroll versus payroll. But the thing about that is Kentucky's is equal to Alabama's. Northwestern's is equal to Ohio State's. And it becomes all about evaluation. And it becomes about development. And it becomes about proper roster allocation. But you know what else? It becomes about staying put. Not because you outlaw transfer portal movement, but because you become far more incentivized to stay at one place for a long time. I said a second ago, there's a ton wrong with the sport right now. It is not beyond repair. If it was, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd go find a new line of work because this would be a dying field. It's not. It's an insane period of churn. The documentaries will be many from the 2020s, when we get to like 2040. I hope the story about college football is, boy, there were some dark periods, but Maybe we needed to go through that to get where we are, fill in the blank. That's what I hope. I believe this was a tipping point, one of many, and I believe that behind closed doors, while it sucks to watch, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, probably gets more angry at this. Tony Petitti in the Big Ten gets angry at this, and they take it and they just wave it in front of Congress's face. I believe there is a motivation amongst anyone in Washington, D.C., which we don't talk about a lot on this show, to make sure college athletics are preserved, college football is preserved, because it's one of the many layers of fabric that make the country unique. So I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole, but I think they're going to get it. I think for the first time, I am more confident than not that they're actually going to get that limited antitrust exemption that many people in my industry think is like Satan wearing a mask walking into college athletics. It's not. It's not. Look around right now, and then you tell me that you've got everything figured out. Because a lot of people advocated for this garbage right now. This is not college football. Not as the way it should be, at least. Academy Sports and Outdoors has your Tennessee gear. I don't know if they have Nico jerseys over there still. Probably not, but Academy Sports and Outdoors has your hookup. You know, fall will come. Week 1 will come. We'll be happy. We'll be happy on Saturdays no matter what. To my knowledge, they still haven't taken that from us. But Academy Sports and Outdoors is the presenting partner of the show. They make the show free. We really appreciate them. Academy.com. If you can't get there in person, but I strongly encourage an in-person visit. Fishing gear, baseball equipment, you want a tent, you want a bike, fill in the blank, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all there. And a big league chew in the checkout line, not mandatory, but I advise it. Academy, we appreciate them. Let's move along. What did we do? We went 30 minutes on the lead topic, huh? Told you guys. I waited 48 hours on that, so we were going to have a lot to say. Now, the spring portal is a funny topic around here. The spring portal, for those unfamiliar, that's the era we're about to enter into. Or, Colin, actually, end point right here, because I don't like the way I said that. If you're watching live, ignore what I just said. The spring transfer portal, that's the period for a few days after spring ball wraps up where you got one last chance. If you're new to college football, don't even bother trying to understand why this thing exists, but it does. So Zach hit me from Irvine, California. He said, is the transfer portal really about to go crazy next week? This is a very, very sensitive topic on this show. Longtime viewers will remember the darkest period of my career, possibly my life, some would say, was this time last year. Because this time last year, I got fed some good old-fashioned bad information. And you may think eating bad fish is the worst thing that could happen to you. No. Take it from someone who had food poisoning last year. I'd take that any day over getting fed bad information. Because food poisoning, while it is terrible, it comes and goes in a few hours. But bad information can stain your reputation forever. So last year, I thought the portal was going to go off. And here's why I thought that. Because I was told by many a player personnel type they thought the portal was going to go off post-spring. So what do? I journey back to Nashville. I turn the mic on and I say, guys, watch out. This post-spring transfer portal, it could be legendary. It could be memorable. Chaos. We got chaos around the bend. And then crickets, absolute crickets. And I had to face the music. But you don't have to take my word for it. Take my word for it. Colin, roll the regrettable footage. Roll it, Colin.
You are about to see the harsh, violent reality of the no-rules transfer portal era on full display later this month. I am not overstating this. It will be the wildest transfer portal era that you've ever seen. And it's going to completely gut some of your teams. Just calling it like it is.
Well, teams did not get gutted. Chaos was not seen. I think I know why this happened to me. I think I know why I got misled. I don't think I'll let it happen again. But we whiffed. I whiffed fantastically on this. But I'm a little angry that this happened. So I'm owning it. I'm owning it. We screw up around here. We're going to own it. We're going to rebuild. We will be better for this. In time, we will surge. We will thrive. But as Meemaw once told me, Sometimes a man's got to be down bad today before he can be up big tomorrow.
And what a great survival story. We're still here. Somehow, we're still here. This was a conditional feel. If you're listening on podcast, this must be very confusing. I'm back live now. This is me on April 13th, 2025. So the question was, is the portal going to go crazy? Now, I hadn't talked about it on the show because I'm very gun shy for reasons you just saw, but this has been a conditional feeling around the country. I've been on the road all spring. I'll be on the road again this week. So I've sat down with a lot of staffs, and they all have been saying the same thing. If this House settlement does not get, passed through or codified or whatever you want to call it before the portal opens up, then the portal could be crazy. Well, the judge came back last week, if you were paying attention or if you weren't. She came back and basically they needed some clarification here and they wanted some language changed there. And it looks like it's still going to be pushed through, but now it's been delayed. And so now the portal window is going to open up. And the whole reason that's important is because of the way collectives are looking at this. They're looking at it and they're saying, well, it sounds like any second now, a new pay structure is going to go into place. We're going to have 20 some odd $1 million of revenue sharing, but then above and beyond that, the NIL thing sounds like it's going to be heavily policed. So that's why a lot of them loaded up on NIL deals in December. They figured this is one last hurrah for us to spend like we've been spending. We can just load up on guys and we can spend a ton because this is the last time that we'll be able to do this. But then the ruling got delayed, so now they're looking and saying, oh, so we may have one more time that we didn't know we would have. So now let's really go out with a spending bang. That's where we are right now. And so a lot of these staffs kept telling me, if that thing doesn't get approved and the second portal window comes, yeah, folks are going to be spending big and they're going to be coming out of spring, so they're going to know what they need. And unlike last year, it may be that there's enough money on the table for big names to be moving. So think about Penn State at wide receiver. Are they going to be aggressive enough to where they go pay a proven commodity to come to State College? It could make the difference in who wins the Big Ten this year. I think about Ohio State. I'm going to talk about them later in the show, but looking at their spring game yesterday, defensive line's not impressive there. Defensive line probably has the least relative amount of certainly proven production. They don't have any proven production there, but the least amount of just overall stacked up talent that they've had in several years because they've been loaded. Do they go get help? Specifically at defensive tackle, do they go get help? Does Tennessee, we all know Tennessee's looking for a quarterback, obviously, and that's a pretty glaringly unique situation, but the amount of money they have to spend, the amount of payroll wiggle room that just came open, plus imagine the outraged boosters who are probably willing to write an irresponsibly large check right now. So Tennessee's got to be watched. USC, everybody's got to be watched. Anybody with money, any non-poverty program has to be watched right now. So I'm not going to do what I did last year. Oh no, even as everyone who's reputable in the industry who covers this stuff is saying, there's about to be some big spending. There's about to be some big movement. What I am doing as the responsible adult that I am for the past 11 months is I am taking a wait and see approach on this. We'll certainly react to it as it happens. And deep down, way down in here, immunity, I do feel like there are several twists and turns coming, but at the same time, I can't do this twice. You see this nose. There's only room for one clown nose on this nose. I can't do it twice. I can't. So, yes, I think it's going to happen. No, I'm not staking what little reputation I have left on it. You remember a couple of weeks ago, we were down in Tallahassee, and then all of a sudden we were in Memphis. And the way we did it was someone gave us a private jet. That's a real sentence. That really happened. And I wore a white T-shirt on that thing just like I do on the show. I did not let you guys down. I traveled on that private jet just as you would have wanted me to. We paid $0 for that thing. How did that happen? Because our friends at AirStar came through for us. And I put together an entire reel of the day because we went from sitting down with Mike Norvell to chasing tornadoes in the span of 2 hours. And that's the thing. You kind of need private aviation to be able to do that. And it turns out that I was not the only one talking to AirStar. Good close friend of the program, Brock Bowers, was as well. And so there was an announcement. And I told our friends at AirStar, you know what, send me that announcement. I'll be happy to play it on the show. Good friends in this commercial that you're about to see. So let me show you. Big announcement from our friends at AirStar. Roll it, Colin.
Precision. It's what wins games and gets me where I need to go. AirStar isn't just private aviation. It's smooth, it's sharp, and it's my kind of ride. It's not about the destination, but the journey that counts. And I want my journey to be elite.
I've always told you guys there's not a whole lot of difference between Brock Bowers and I. We're not so different, he and I. That's the very jet that we took. So congrats to Brock Bowers. Good, solid signing there. High character guy. I don't think they'll have much to worry about. I want to talk to you about spring games or spring practices. Practi, plural of practice. I struggled with how to talk about this, though. We had a little staff meeting, and in previous years we would react to spring games. But what happened this past Saturday, those were not spring games. So what I've done is I've gotten around to several practices this spring. I've watched a lot of real scrimmages that are closed to the public. They tackle and everything. It's crazy. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to react to a few teams that did have spring somethings yesterday, but I'm not just going to talk about the game or the practice. I'm going to give you some coming out of spring thoughts on some of these teams. So Bama had a day yesterday, which is more kind of an open practice than anything. I'm unchanged on the quarterback position here. I heard Ryan Grubb say there's not a lot of separation, which there isn't. I'm not claiming this is done. I'm not claiming that they've secretly made the decision who's going to start against Florida State. When I say my opinion is unchanged, I think it's Ty Simpson's job to lose. It is his job to lose. I don't think, barring injury, that's going to change. To me, the bigger focal point has been these two cats right here, Austin Mack, Keelan Russell, because right now, probably entered spring thinking Mack was a solid number 2 and Keelan Russell is the promising true freshman. I think the more spring has gone on, the more they've realized we got to get Keelan Russell ready to play because he'll be good enough and also because he probably will give us the next best chance to win by the time fall gets here. Very important, especially if you've got the opinion I've got. This has the chance to be an extremely good wide receiver room. I've been down there this spring. Those guys are for real. And Ryan Williams not even practicing. So when you watch them go, you understand the best is not even out there. But I think they really hit on some of those true freshmen. I really think that they are about as deep as they've been at that position in quite a few years. Now, I can't go back a long time because for a while, Alabama was the standard when it came to wide receiver rooms. But just as much as you say that, I think their DB room's really underrated as well. I'll put it to you this way. There are guys who saw a ton of minutes for them, ton of snaps last year, who are not necessarily hurt, but may just get passed up because of quality competition and because they've evaluated good there. They got some good players in that secondary. So that was a problem at times for them last year. So I'm really, that's what I'm interested to watch with them come week 1. But a few different times this year, they're going to face really good, deep receiver rooms, good quarterbacks, and the ability to get off the field and the ability to play balls in the air. That kind of stuff, at times last year they looked good. At times they looked lost. How far have they come there? What I worry about with Bama is their run game. The consistency, anytime you see those offenses out there that are consistent, inevitably there is a good, solid, dependable ground game baked in. That doesn't always mean you got a 1,000-yard rusher in the room, but it does mean you can count on it and it's consistent. And I don't know if I feel that about them coming out of spring. Still plenty of time, and who knows, they may do something in the portal. Or maybe they've got the right guys on campus, and I'm just seeing it wrong. But the ability to consistently rely on a ground game and then the ability to disrupt at pass rushing positions, that's what I wonder about with them. I wonder about multiple year guys. Keon Keeley is a guy that I watched closely when I went down there. And I'm just kind of interested, is that a guy who's found his niche? Because you don't have a Dallas Turner on that team. You don't have a Will Anderson on that team. That doesn't mean you can't get after the passer. Doesn't mean, guys on the interior can't cause that. But can they consistently do it? Can they consistently affect the quarterback? Can they consistently run the ball the way they need to? Two big questions for Alabama with me. I think team mentality is really good. Really good. I think, I'm not saying they went like full Junction Boys mode on them, because you can't do that anymore because you go to prison. But about as close to that line as you can get, I think they went in winter and spring, which is a far cry from what they had to pull the reins back on last year, or else everyone would have entered the portal. So just interesting times there at Alabama. They're going to be a factor, I believe, in the SEC championship picture. They're watching us in Houston, Texas, Kingsport, Tennessee, Billings, Montana. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's move along. So at Miami, no Carson Beck all spring. We knew that. Actually, Mario Cristobal, after their spring game yesterday, said he's cleared to throw starting Monday. So they'll do their player-led workouts, and Carson Beck, it's mid-April right now, so you got the rest of April, May, June, July, August. You got 4 solid months where he goes from being able to throw again to starting, presumably, week 1. Who do they play? Notre Dame, week 1. So it's kind of hard. I understand that. Some of you went to the spring game. You've watched the practice footage. Like, you're watching Luke Nickel, and you're watching Emory Williams, and you're thinking to yourself, well, neither of those are equipped to help us win this year. I question whether Emory Williams is going to be around there long term. I just don't know if his ceiling is high enough to be the starting quarterback at Miami. Great kid, man. I love Emory Williams, but Carson Beck was brought in to be that guy. If no further limitations arise, will be the guy that starts for him week 1. But offense wasn't a problem for them last year, obviously. Defense was historically bad. So then they go and they get Heatherman from Minnesota as the coordinator. If you go watch Miami practice, it's the most mind-boggling thing, because you look at the caliber of athlete on defense, and that is not the issue. Talent is not the issue. It won't be this year. Piss poor communication, lack of being a soundment sign, lack of just basic fundamentals, playing to a standard, playing consistently, the stuff that people think is coach speak but is really not. It crippled them last year. I wonder how far you can come on that front in the span of one spring. So no one's going to trash them right now. Mario said all the right things with them coming out of spring ball, but also said we got a ways to go, which every coach says. I wonder, how far can they progress defensively over the span of one spring, summer, fall camp period? I don't know that we got the answer to that. I don't know that they have the answer to that yet. The depth and size of them now compared to them when Cristobal and his staff first got there, so noticeable. Don't care if you're a hater or a fan of Miami. At the very least, you look at them and you say, yeah, they look way different. You watch their twos in practice, and they look way different than some of the frontline guys that they used to roll with. But that doesn't win you games. It's the stuff you need to win games, but that doesn't guarantee you anything. It's just that it's nice to see. It lets you know, in other words, like if you go watch them practice or you watch the spring game and you look at the caliber of athlete out there, you look at the size on the lines of scrimmage, specifically that O-line. I'll talk about that in a second. You realize if we lose this fall, it won't be because we don't have athletes. That's the most helpless feeling. You felt it if you're Miami in the past of, wow, we're getting beat and we don't stack up with them physically. We're not fast enough to beat this team. We're not big enough to push that team back. Well, you may lose 4 games this year for all I know, but it won't be because you got out-athleted. It'll be because you got out-executed, out-coached, out-schemed, whatever, or maybe you'll go 12-0, and none of those things happen. I was down there last fall, it was during the season, and they got some big offensive linemen. And I am looking at a guy, number 70, I believe, wasn't a starter last year. And I go ask one of those coaches, I say, who is that? And they say, well, that's Markel Bell. We got him from community college in Mississippi. Now, anyone who knows the JUCO ranks or the community college ranks in Mississippi, you know they're just aliens all over the place. No one knows their name. Academically, maybe they didn't have their act together coming out of high school. They had to go that route. But here's the thing about being 6'9", 350. If you can get that stuff in order, you can go play pretty much anywhere. So Markel Bell's running with their twos last year. 6'9", 350. I'm not trying to hype him up because I am not qualified to break down the finer points of offensive line play. I'm just telling you, when you see a body like that, very athletic, really athletic. He does not look, the thing about 350 is when you're 6'9" carrying it, you don't look all that fat. And so I'm watching him last year, and the feedback is, now he's next year, 2025, that's one to watch. So I'm watching him, and you won't have problem finding him when you watch him on tape. How active are they going to be in the spring portal, by the way? I would be shocked if Miami didn't make a few moves in this upcoming couple of weeks in the spring portal. So it's yet again, it's going to be an ACC contending team. They've got a much tougher schedule this year, but if they're good enough, it won't matter. That's kind of how I view Miami right now. Georgia, actually, Colin, I shifted on you pretty quick there. Let me pop the top on this Vanilla Cola Zevia. Look, power ratings wise, I told you this the other day, I'm going to tell you this again. Cream Soda Zevia is still clearly number one in the power ratings. But when it comes to rankings, some are saying Vanilla Cola Zevia is number one at the moment. I'm not saying that. I'm saying some people are saying that. Hold on a second. And you can understand why. The rare second sip. Yeah, Vanilla Cola Zevia, power ratings wise, they're not up there. You got to have more than one good week to pass cream soda. But rankings, those voters, they're prone to knee-jerk reactions, and apparently they're really loving what they're getting with Vanilla Cola right now. Again, if you're new around here, you have no clue what I'm talking about. This sounds like Portuguese. This is zero sugar, people. Zevia, rolling with zero sugar, and I never drank that stuff. What's the past tense? I never messed with it before until I found Zevia, because it actually tastes really good. And there's also zero sugar. It's just an added bonus. So now I got that done. We move on to Georgia. Georgia had G-Day yesterday. Gunnar Stockton. I was reading Ben Wolk's stuff over on Dogs 24/7. He was talking about Gunnar Stockton, who's going to start at quarterback for Georgia this year. They had Puglisi throw like 50 times in the spring game yesterday, but he's not going to start for him. So Quick Trip logo in the background in the B-roll, by the way. I saw that. So Ben Wolk, who covers Georgia for Dogs 24/7, he was talking about Gunnar Stockton, and he was talking about how universally loved he is in the locker room. He's right about that. Not that he needs to know that. I'm just saying I can validate that. I can verify that. That whole organization loves that kid. Now, here's where that matters. There are times in the season where if you've got a quarterback that you feel that way about collectively, and you're willing to just go over the cliff for him, you can't quantify the value of that. But I know it when I see it. And you know it when you saw it in the SEC championship game last year. Everyone remembers Georgia won. Everyone remembers Carson Beck went down. Do you remember they trailed when the backup came in? And they had to come from behind and win. And it's not that Stockton put on a clinic with his arm. It's that just collectively, they bubble gummed and paper clipped their way to a win. It's a beautiful thing to watch from a program standpoint, from a culture standpoint. Well, he's their guy this year. And they all swear by him. Not in a sense that, hey, watch out, this is a sleeper for the Heisman. It's, we can win with him. We're Georgia. We recruit at a very high level across the board. If we're worth our salt, we ought to be able to put a winner around him. That's kind of how they feel. So I thought they looked good at running back. They were not great there last year. And I watched him yesterday. I watched the replay of it. And they've got like four guys that, from my eyes perspective, they look like they can win with. And that'd be a welcome change from what they didn't have last year. Chauncey Bowens had a good day yesterday, but I looked at four guys and said, he looks good. He looks good. And I don't mean grading on a curve. I mean, that looks like a Georgia running back. That's a guy they can win with. But I will tell you, because I had a buddy from back home text me and say, I guess we're not looking for a tailback in the portal. Georgia's looking for running back help in the portal. I can promise you that. I can confirm that. They're looking for running back help in the portal. I don't know if they'll get it, and I don't know that they need it, but I do know that they want it. Offensive line, defensive line. When you watch that, at least from what they did yesterday, the best way I could describe that is flashes, and it's a weird format, and I don't even pretend to be drawn a whole lot from that. I did not get to watch Georgia practice all spring. So I did not watch them. What I got to see of them is what you got to see of them yesterday. So I would label both of those units question marks, but understanding, just like we talk about with Ohio State, and we will in a second, when you call a line of scrimmage unit a question mark for Georgia, it's a question mark, but it's a weird one because there's like infinitely higher upside to a Georgia question mark on the offensive or defensive line than there is Fresno State. So it just means that over-under of 9.5 wins is largely contingent on what the answer there is. It's really hard to have a good feel for them right now. And I don't think that that's unique to me. I think that's you, that's me, that's them. Kirby is on your screen right now. We were down there a few weeks ago and talked with a ton of people in the building. There's optimism, but none of them pretend like they've wink, wink, nod, nod. They've got this season figured out and they know what's coming. They don't know what's coming. They know what they think they're capable of. They know what they hope they learned from last year. But you got the head coach talking about the most precious commodity around there being fire and passion and hunger and desire. And he wants to find that in spring. You know, that's not whether a guy squares his in route right at 12 yards. Like, those aren't necessarily the things that they're focused on, although drops would be nice to limit. And I still saw some of those at the wide receiver position yesterday. But Georgia is so fascinating because they're all the same this year. All the favorites feel like they're the same this year. We got a question later in the show about that, of good athletes everywhere, not a ton of proven returning production, but that logo means something, and so you're never going to discount it, but you have no clue what to expect week one. And that's how I feel coming out of spring with them. Got another one here I feel the same way about. Ohio State had their spring game yesterday. Doesn't sound like defensive line pleased a lot of people up there. It should not be a shock. They lost most everyone, and those were multi-year guys. That was part of the nucleus of what ended up being a national championship team. So talking to some people around that program, of course, that's not a shock, but look, they understand if we don't go and get some superstar difference maker out of the portal, we're going to be dealing with a limited hand on the defensive line this upcoming year. Now, here's what could happen. Remember this time last year, everyone, including me, was very skeptical that Notre Dame's offensive line could achieve at a high level because they were extremely inexperienced. And they go into A&M and they win week one. That was supposed to be a huge mismatch against Notre Dame, and they win. And then they got hurt during the year, and they still found a way for that to be a strength of their team. So Larry Johnson's still there. That DNA of that Ohio State program is still there. Maybe they surprise everyone. What I'm saying is that's what it's going to take for defensive line to be a strength of that team this year. But every team has a weakness. Ohio State's got it. Oregon's going to have it. Penn State's going to have it. Everybody's in the Big Ten and beyond is going to have it. So you've got a really good coaching staff up there. That just means you've got to cover it up somehow. I think they're capable of doing that. I still think at the quarterback position, it'll be Julian Sayin who starts for them. But he wasn't the guy who trotted out there first yesterday. It was Lincoln Kineholz. I thought it was interesting that Sayin was the guy they put in to run 2-minute. And I think ultimately he's the one with the highest upside, and I think he will win the job. But I don't think he's won the job yet. And I know when they had public practice a couple of weeks ago, he did not have the best of days. And since you don't get to go to practice every day, that's kind of people's lasting impression of him. I think he'll be the one who ends up winning that starting job. But it's not the worst thing in the world. Competition, not the worst thing in the world. Picture the Texas game, though. Here, it's obvious why people are paying attention to the quarterback battle, because it's the quarterback position at Ohio State. But above and beyond that, if you picture what I just said, then you frame it within the context of Texas, because that's who they play week one, by the way, in Columbus. If your defensive line is not close to being what it was last year, therefore you can't affect the quarterback like you could last year, or you can't get off the field on 3rd and 4th down like you could last year, you know, you may need to score 35 to win in week one. And if you have to do that, you got the wide receivers to do it. But if you have to do that, do you have the quarterback you trust to do that? That's why that quarterback position, that's why that battle is so important. You have one you can trust. By then, not now, by then. I trust Quick Trip. I don't know how many years they've been in the game, but they're not new. But I trust Quick Trip. They've made the spring tour possible, and I'm going to be on the road again this week. And, oh, I didn't tell you what happened. Okay. Quick Trip had nothing to do with this, but I'm at Iowa State the other day. This is a sad story. I mean, I may not even let the kids listen. That's how sad this story is. No animals will be harmed, though. So I'm at Iowa State the other day, watching them practice, had to leave a little bit early, had to catch a flight. The good news is flight leaves on time. So I'm flying from Des Moines to Nashville through Atlanta. Big complex of storms moving through Atlanta. We cannot land. So they put us in a holding pattern. I kid you not, we circle Columbus, Georgia, my hometown, for an hour, Columbus being the emergency backup option if they need to land and refuel. And then the announcement comes. We're kind of almost out of fuel, so we have to land. The storms have not let up. In fact, they're moving towards us. And I had several points of contention with how Delta and the pilots handled this, but that's between me and the pilots. But anyway, we have to try and land. Something called an outflow boundary, often accompanied with approaching storms, hits our plane with the force of like 17 high-pressure car washes all at once, and we have to abort the landing in Columbus. Terrifying. People screaming, people crying, terrifying. And I'm like, are we out of fuel? No Quick Trip. They have not gone airborne yet. So then the announcement comes, we're going to Dothan. Now, I know where Dothan is. I've spent time in Dothan. But the rest of this plane is from Des Moines, Iowa. These people have no clue what a Dothan is. It could be a guy. It could be a statue. It could be a town. As it turns out, that's what it was. And you're landing a jet, a commercial jet in Dothan, Alabama in the middle of the night. They power that thing down. The pilots throw up the deuces. They're gone. Flight attendant comes over the intercom, clearly shaken, saying, they didn't tell me anything. I don't know what's happening right now. And then they left us in Dothan. Dothan Airport shut down, as it does around sundown every day. And we're left on our own. Plane full of people from Iowa, stranded in Dothan overnight. So I get the hotel booked, get an Uber, 25 minutes to get there. But I was just happy to get one. I don't know what the rest of the plane even did. Wake up the next morning, our friends at Hertz down in Dothan, oh, they came through for me. Andy and John came through for me. And they hooked me up with a one-way rental. I drive 6 hours from Dothan to Nashville in time to make Friday night softball and hit 3 bombs Friday night. But I don't want that to be the focal point of the story. The focal point of the story is definitely not us getting a 1-and-1 doubleheader split on Friday night. The focal point of the story is I stopped at 2 Quick Trips on the way home. I told you that story was going somewhere. I didn't know if I was going somewhere for a little while. Those aborted landings, I don't know how many of those you've been through on a regional jet, given recent news around the aviation community, not too fun. In your hometown, no less, not too fun. All right, let's move along. We had a very interesting, dare I say, tantalizing what-if presented to us. Jay Bird hit us, good friend of the program. He said, what if the top 4 favorites to win it all just truly take a step back this year because of roster attrition? Now, he's hitting on something we've been hitting on, and that is, at FanDuel right now, you got your favorites to win a national title in any order. It's Ohio State, it's Oregon, it's Texas, it's Georgia. So Jay Bird is saying none of them return more than 50% production. None of them have a starting quarterback returning. What if not 1 or 2 or 3, but all 4 of them take a step back? Well, then you have a recipe for chaos. You got a recipe for one of the most memorable November stretch runs in recent college football memory, because that's the stuff that 07 seasons are made from. So I think about the Big Ten piece there. If Oregon and Ohio State are both off the pace, I guess they could still win the conference, because them being off still just, it basically includes them falling back to earth. They basically fall back to being level with Penn State or Michigan or whoever. So I guess they could still win the conference, but at that point, a huge beneficiary is Penn State. Because if Oregon and Ohio State are off the mark a little bit, I think most people would kind of frame the Big Ten as that's exactly what needs to happen for Penn State. Now, James Franklin would say we can win the thing no matter what. And good, he ought to have that mentality. But I would look at it and I would say, yeah, that may be true, but it's really true if Ohio State and Oregon are off pace a little bit. What could Michigan pull something crazy off? Could a Nebraska or an Iowa, Wisconsin? They got John Gruden speaking to him in spring practice. Could they pull something off? And then in the SEC, it's the same thing. If Texas and Georgia are off the pace a little bit, the difference there is I would have to ask, because I think the depth of the SEC is a little bit better on the second level. Does like an Alabama or an LSU, do they become an A-level team this year? Because just because Texas and Georgia aren't, doesn't mean Bama or LSU couldn't be that. Now, you could argue in the Big Ten, Penn State could be that. I know, that's why I said that. But in the SEC, it could be Bama, or it could be LSU, or it could be Ole Miss. Florida's got the roster for it. Oklahoma's got the roster for it, believe it or not. South Carolina made some noise last year. Texas A&M, year 2 under Mike Elko. They're just more possible dark horses down there. But if it's just a bunch of pretty good, then what you probably end up having is you probably end up having a bunch of 3-loss teams yelling that they should get in the playoff, just like we had last year. And then the follow-up question is, what does it take to win it all? If all the favorites are off by just a little bit, does a B-plus level team win the national title? And what I start to think about is the Big 12. You could, of course, think about Clemson or somebody from the ACC, but I could see Clemson winning a title. I have been on the record as saying no Big 12 team is going to win a title in this current structure. But if none of the favorites wind up fulfilling their end of the bargain, then maybe they can. Maybe Arizona State can. Maybe Texas Tech can. Maybe Kansas State can. What I'm saying is you get a really random national champ that you never thought possible. It's an unlikely if, but it is an if that we have to entertain. All those odds are available at FanDuel as we speak. Those aren't just decorative. Those aren't just things Director Colin makes a graphic of for fun. You can go bet that right now. If you think Ohio State, despite those defensive line limitations, is going to win it all, you can go bet it right now. You'll get a great price. But if you also think what Jay Bird said is true, and there's going to be chaos, and you think like Washington's going to go on a run, well, then you can really have some fun over at FanDuel. The exclusive odds provider of the show is FanDuel, and we appreciate them, expecting some big things with them in the future. Okay, let's wrap up the show with a fun-filled question about one of the biggest enemies, according to some, in the current landscape of college football. I do not endorse that mentality because I do not, we just differ. We just differ. You and I fought about this before. Colin, here's a good end point. The Truth Teller series is continuing. Sometimes we tell the truth about a coach or a program or a conference, but tonight I wanted to take some time and tell the truth about something that most of you hate and I don't hate, maybe even love. Big Noon Kickoff. Fox's premier college football window every Saturday is Big Noon Kickoff, aptly titled because the game kicks off at noon Eastern time. So Penn State folks, I don't even expect you to have a level head when I'm talking about this, and you shouldn't, because if I was a Penn State fan, Fox has screwed me out of so many potential whiteout games that I would be irate, and I don't expect you to understand someone like me when I say, hey, I love Big Noon Kickoff. But I am in the minority, and I'm selfish about this. You guys know, if you've watched or listened for a long time, you shouldn't even acknowledge me on this. If you're a fan, I'm thinking differently than you this one time, because I always have to travel to get back home to do the show Sunday, and Big Noon Kickoff often affords me the opportunity to go to the game, get to the airport, and get home that night. That's all there is to it. That's why I started loving Big Noon Kickoff. But most of you don't have to do that, and so you want the primetime game, and I get it. But I have a plan when I'm commissioner to solve this. I have listened to you. I have a plan. But Fox made the proper decision, really, if you think about it. If you put yourself in Fox's shoes, they looked around and they said, wait a second. So CBS has their big game at 3:30. ABC puts a big game at 3:30. Like everyone puts a big game at 3:30, and then everyone who has a game, ABC and ESPN mainly, they backload their day. They put their most valuable games in prime time. Fox came along and said, why is nobody properly leveraging the noon time slot? Because in college football, think about the pattern of your day. you wake up and you either go to the gym or you get all your family obligations out of the way in the morning. You go to Home Depot or the grocery store, or you're watching Game Day or Big Noon, the Fox's pregame show. But it's all building up to the noon kickoffs. It's not like people are saying college football is an afterthought until 3:30 or 4. You're locked in from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed. And Fox said, well, if that's going to be the case, why try and put our most valuable game in between all the other A games? Why don't we take this noon window? I thought it was smart. I still think it was smart. It's just that the problem is the way college football media rights deals work is networks sign deals with conferences, which I hate, because the way I wish it worked is what I'll lay out for you in a second. But the way I wish it worked is not the way it works. So, for instance, Fox has a deal with the Big Ten. It's not like Fox has a deal with every other conference where they have this limitless supply of games to choose from. So pretty much every week, Fox is taking the biggest game in the Big Ten and they're putting it at noon. Well, the problem is Penn State folks have a long and storied tradition of making their big game a night game to make it the whiteout game. But that does not supersede the rights that Fox has paid to acquire. And so they come along and say, Penn State, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. This year, who knows, Penn State, Oregon, noon kickoff, noon kickoff, noon kickoff, and it sucks for them. The way I wish this worked, by the way, when I'm college football commissioner, the way I hope this works is we burn all the rights agreements. We start from scratch, and every network has a piece of college football, but you have a draft every week. And so there is no exclusive deal. Like ESPN does not have an exclusive deal with the SEC. Fox doesn't have an exclusive deal with the Big Ten. Everybody has a college football deal. And NBC and CBS and Netflix and Amazon and Fox are at the table every week, and we're rotating depending on how much you've bought in, but you get to draft games every week. And so what could happen is one week Fowler and Herbstreit could be calling a Big 12 game, and the next week they're doing an SEC game, but Klatt and Gus Johnson, same thing. They could be doing a Penn State game one week, they could be doing a Texas A&M game the next week, and it would wreak havoc on their travel schedule, but they get compensated handsomely for this. What you would get, finally, if you're a Penn State fan or an Ohio State fan, is get an opportunity for your games to happen in prime time. And let me tell you something. Yes, this matters for fans. Yes, it matters for the viewer. You know how hard it is for those recruiting and personnel departments to take kids who are playing high school football games on Friday night and get them to State College, Pennsylvania in time for a noon kickoff the next day. You ever tried to fly into State College? No, you can't. Harrisburg, Johnstown, York, Wilkes-Barre, Philly, Pittsburgh, that's where you're flying into. And then you're trying to drive. And look, I've been out in rural parts of the country recently, so it's just straight interstate, and you can check out mentally for 10, 15 minutes at a time. It is white knuckle. It is spaghetti plot roadways all over Pennsylvania. And so it's tough to get guys there for noon kickoffs. And so it's a disadvantage in recruiting. So look, when I'm commissioner, we'll solve this. But in the meantime, all I'm saying is I don't think big noon kickoff's the worst thing in the world. And I'm glad you're not in here with me right now because I know you disagree. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We do the show free. We do it all year. We don't talk about anything else. It's just college football. And we hope to keep it that way for a long time. Over 60% of you are unsubscribed. I think it's like 58%. So it doesn't cost anything. Just hit the subscribe button. And then have 5 of your friends do the same. Thank you. We'll have a show Thursday night. Going to be on the road this week. Follow on socials at Josh Pate CFB. Some good stuff in the Instagram story in particular. For assistant producer Belchi, good job tonight. For Director Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great start to your week, and God bless.